Okay, we are now live.
This is Senate Appropriations Committee. One of the areas that we're going to take testimony today would be from VHCB. We have two reasons for wanting to get testimony. One is related to whether there is a need or a possibility of moving some money sooner for the housing initiative that was proposed by the governor in a smaller bill. If there were, in fact, projects ready to go to be acquired, would it make sense to include an appropriation for housing? Not all of it, but a portion of it, so that we could get moving on some projects that are in the pipeline and ready to move. And then the other would be a longer term discussion around what is included in the governor's proposal for the one-time list of $211 million. So obviously what we focus today would be around a potential allocation toward that housing initiative. So we're glad we have Gus Seelig and Jennifer Haller today with us from VHCB. Also, I would say I did hear back from some of the congressional offices, and it seems like there may be in the next round in the House bill, the recognition that there might be some help for homeowners, because the rental assistance really doesn't help homeowners who could be really in difficult financial straits with utilities and other costs. So we're hoping that that we'll see some more money come into the housing arena as well. So with that said, welcome and thank you for being here. I'll let you you understand what our focus is today, and I'll let you take it from there, Gus and Jen. And you're muted.
For the record, I'm Gus Seelig, the director for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and Jen Haller is with me, and she's our policy director, and I think has told staff she may get a notice that she gets pulled into another committee momentarily. So if she disappears, that's what happened.
And what committee is taking precedent over Senate Appropriations, might I ask?
Well,
An excellent question, Madam Chair.
None, right?
if there were only one of us, we would not leave you.
Right.
You didn't answer my question. So, okay.
No committee takes precedence over Senate Appropriations is the and only answer.
But we're
okay.
stuck with Gus. We're stuck with Gus in that.
Well, if you just want to write a big check, I'll leave and Jen will stay. If that's the preference, that would be fine with me. Let me just start by saying, as you know, the Housing and Conservation Coalition's been virtually with you this week, and really appreciated hearing from Senator Kitchell and Senator Ballant yesterday, and thanks for taking the time to join them. To the question you're putting in front of us, it's been put in front of me in a couple different ways, and one is there an opportunity to catch the construction season? And I guess I want to differentiate for a moment what we did with the CRF funding that you made available to us from what I think the governor has requested in one-time funding. And basically, the federal funding that you gave us was specifically and only to deal with the issues of the pandemic as related to homelessness. And what we did with that was different than what we usually do, which is it became the sole source of funding to acquire as much housing as we could. So, or to get housing back into operation that had been out of operation. And so people didn't have to take the time to go find other funding sources to match it with. It's actually a statutory priority that we are to leverage funding as much as possible. So as an example, with the housing revenue bond, we had $37 million that you provided from that bond, and we turned it into about over $200 million of real estate and construction activity, whereas the $33 million from CRF became maybe $35 million of activity because we were acquiring properties that required very little construction. And I think it's the intent that we try to take this $20 million and leverage it as much as possible. Um, so they have two different purposes. That said, if any CRF funding were to be freed up, there are a couple projects that we think could go quickly. We don't, a deal is not a deal until people sign. A few things, but there is potential for 70 apartments in Williston that could be put into service very quickly. The St. Albans shelter had given us a proposal and then had to drop it because of environmental concerns. We think those concerns could be overcome. So there are some things that could be done very rapidly. A different thing we did, and we're doing this both in Bradford and in Hardwick, along with Bristol, was to buy some modular homes, zero energy modular homes. That some of those homes were delayed because of supply chain interruptions. I'd have to talk with a company that we got those homes from in Maine to see if there was more that we could do. So if you provide some funding early on, you'd be priming the pump. It would be a signal to everybody to get going as quickly as possible. But I would not come into the committee and insist that you must, because I don't know that we have deals today that can get done as rapidly as the ones we did last fall. But we may well be able to catch the construction season in a couple of instances. And if there were more CRF funding that didn't need to be leveraged because it now has this year's time frame on it, we might try to do projects like the one I just described in Williston, where there really isn't a good matching source. It doesn't need any rehab. The facility needs little or no rehab. So
perhaps, Gus, you can explain then. It seems to me what you're differentiating the governor's 20 million and saying we don't want to. I think we need to understand what's in that proposal more than we do. But you're differentiating between that and using CRF money for these particular projects, which I would gather from your testimony, you would suggest were not going to be projects to be funded under the 20 million criteria. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that. If you could explain that, maybe other people understand it.
It really goes to a policy question of long-term impact and short-term impact. So if we take $20 million and we and our partners leverage it with other funding, we might create $80 million of activity in the real estate market and do something over 500 or 600 homes. If we invested, as we did the CRF funding, just in stuff we can buy and turn into housing in as short a time period as possible, there won't be any leverage. There won't be the economic benefits of all that construction activity. And because we're paying the full price, we might only do 100, 120, or 130 apartments. It will take longer to leverage the 20 million. It'll go out a little bit. It'll go out more slowly. It'll have a bigger impact in terms of overall numbers of homes affected and numbers of Vermonters affected, but it won't happen as fast. To give you an example, now that I think the largest thing we would do with the new money will continue to be multifamily rental housing. That's the greatest need in the state. There has been a lot of advocacy in recent years around the need to have a repair fund for farm labor housing. There is, and the multifamily housing, I should say, will continue to be for downtowns and village centers and smart growth sites like those that you have seen us support over many years. That's our primary mission. The governor has asked for some focus on home ownership, and that has a positive impact on the rental market when you get people who are just on the margin of being able to buy a home out of the rental market and become homeowners. That's a good thing. So we would probably enhance that level of activity. A project that we did a study last year on the needs of mobile home parks. Senator Ballant would be the first to tell you that she has the largest mobile home park cooperative in the state in Brattleboro. It's over 300 homes. 40 of those homes are not in the floodplain, they're in the floodway and need to be moved out. The park is old and tired. It needs road upgrades, sewer upgrades, water upgrades, electric upgrades. That's the sort of project that's going to take a lot of time. It'll probably take several $1,000,000 from us and would need to leverage other sources in order to happen. So if what you said to me, and I've had this discussion in the other body, is we really just want you to get as many units on the street as fast as possible, we would do that. But we would do it at the expense of creating more overall impact over a couple of year period of time, which is what our traditional work is, as with the project that you're most familiar with in downtown St. Johnsbury. That was not a short-term undertaking, but it'll have a big impact on the community. And beyond the dollars we put in, brought in a lot of other funding. So that's our dilemma in terms of which way we go on this. Does that help on differentiate?
All right. Yes, it does. I guess what I would ask is for that 20 million, which you said if it leverage could really equate to about 80 million total investment when you bring in all these sources, and it would fund 500 to 600 homes. Would the example then, would the 70 apartments in Williston that you referenced, would that be a project that you would fund under this 20 million? Or I don't have a good sense of what fits in that bucket in your mind.
So the project in Williston would convert a 99-room motel into 70 apartments.
Okay.
And it would do it with almost no rehab. And therefore, it's not a good candidate for the low-income housing tax credit because
Okay.
it doesn't generate basis.
Okay. All right. So it doesn't fit. That's what you've answered my question.
Yes, it doesn't fit. It does not fit easily. It's not impossible, but it doesn't fit easily.
Okay. Senator
Madam
Baruth.
Chair, could
Yes.
I ask Gus, which motel in Williston?
I can't tell you the name, and I probably should have just said Chittenden County, because these are things that are not. There's no
Understood.
purchase and sales. I don't.
Got it.
So.
Thank you.
But I would say to you, Senator, that, since you're new to this committee, that our criteria would want anything we invest in to be not so far away from services or public transit that it would be a hardship for people to live there.
No, understood. I was just, I happen to know those buildings pretty well. So if I heard the name, I could make a judgment about how quickly they might be turned over. But I see your point about your ongoing negotiations.
So what you're really telling us is that part of what the 20 million does is serve as the catalyst to draw down a total of 80 million. The other ones that you have in the pipeline are kind of dollar for dollar in terms of the impact on the end result. It's you spend 50,000, it's 50,000 as opposed to the multiplier that you're getting with the 20 million.
So that would be CRF funds that you could get out the door quick.
Well, do you have a price tag on any of, like the St. Albans shelter?
I believe it's something that would happen at under $1 million, and I'll have to get. I mean, before we ran into the environmental issues, I think it was going to be about a $600,000 acquisition and rehab.
Okay, all right. Well, yes, Jen, you're muted, but we'd love to hear from you.
Madam Chair, I wonder if I might offer another way to think about it is that with the coronavirus relief funds, the projects have to be done and the units have to be ready to be occupied by the end of the year. That does not give anyone time to go around and assemble the other resources in order to do that. And they just can do a very light or moderate level of rehab. So in that instance, it's really the state funds has to be the sole source. Typically what VHCB does is put in 10 to 20% of a project funding, and we use that to drive the direction of the project and go around and collect all the other resources.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. Well, it sounds perhaps like part of this discussion is will be influenced by future action in Washington as well with other bills, whether we're talking about promotion of home ownership to any other funding streams that come in with that money. So I think I understand. Right now, the governor's proposing off the one-time general fund list, the 20 million. You're recommending that money be used to leverage tax credits and be for projects where that leveraging can occur, and 80 million. And that if there was some way of moving money forward, and CRF is pretty well allocated, as you know, at this point, then there are a couple of ways that we could use it to address at least what you're talking about, the St. Albans shelter, maybe some of the modular homes that got tied up in the supply chain delay, and a possible acquisition of a conversion of a motel into 70 apartments. Okay. Do I have it down right on my sheet of paper?
Yes, you do. That's exactly what I said. Yes, you got it.
Okay.
Word for word.
Well, I just want to make sure. But we also wanted to explore every opportunity, and this is very helpful as it relates to the longer, the discussion around the governor's proposal, which we would consider. And it sounds like really, if there's anything that would fast track, would be more on the CRF front, which right now we aren't exactly flush with CRF money. So,
Right,
okay, that's helpful. Other information or questions of Gus or Jen, or more that you want to tell us, Gus?
It looks like Senator Starr wants to say something, so I have a
He
couple other
isn't
things.
putting his hand up. Let me see. I got to turn. Oh, there he is. All right.
And you notice my fingers going in the right direction.
I would have noticed otherwise.
I was just wondering, Gus, you mentioned the farm labor housing issue a little bit. We had the guy in from UVM that's done quite a lot of research on that, and I'm hoping that somehow we can put a little part of your money towards rehabbing maybe some of that, especially for the immigrant workers that are here long-term.
Isn't that part of your 20 million? You mentioned that as a use.
Yes, that's among our plans, Senator. So we definitely want to do that. I did want to address one other issue, which may be a hot button for all of you, but we have had an ongoing discussion with the administration about how we use all of our resources. And historically, this administration has asked us to tilt more to housing than conservation, and we have done that. As they were changing their budget assumptions, which, as you all know, happened pretty quickly, they came to us and said, would you use more money? And we said, sure. And we had a discussion with them that didn't make it into the budget document that you have, but our discussion was the need for flexibility in order to continue some of our rural development, conservation-related rural community development activities that this committee has always been supportive of. And so we will present in the other body some language that the administration has agreed to, but our general plan is to take about up to a quarter of that funding and support things like the grant writer program, the farm and forest viability program, conservation activities that build the rural economy, like we've done with Kingdom Trails and Prospect Mountain, and some projects that will enhance the opportunity for young farmers to buy a farm. So when we get back in the committee, that will be part of our discussion with you. You may have a view that the housing need is so critical that you want all the resources to go there. But as you know, we have a dual mission. We think we will still get to just about $20 million in total housing expenditures in the coming year. But we'd like the flexibility to use that 20 million a little bit more broadly than only housing.
All
I
right.
think that makes a lot of sense to me, that you don't just give up one whole area to devote it all to another. And, what the work you've done, like with the Kingdom Trails, the grant writing program, all those things have generated a lot of extra money for the rural citizens of the state. And I'd hate to drop the ball on all of those projects just to get a few more housing units going.
Let me ask, did the governor's proposed budget include the funding for the grant writer? It never used to, and then last year it did. So I'm wondering, is it in or out?
It's not in as a line item, but what they did was restore the reduction in our base last year. But we'd like to, I mean, it'd be a small amount, but last year you got it up to 100,000. We would like to more than double that, because we think the potential is there, and there's going to be all kinds of federal resources we think that small communities ought to be going after whenever the Congress passes the relief packages that the president is proposing. So we want to put those communities in a place to compete for them.
You think they'll go out in competitive grants?
I think some will. There's a big increase the state is receiving in something called the Land and Water Conservation Fund. The town of Pownell, I think, used that program to begin to build a trail system. I think there are going to be resources available for, and sometimes, with most of our small towns, they don't have staff. And so getting a grant writer, I think that Senator Leahy has always been a big fan of the value-added producer grants at USDA. That's another thing that we do with the grant writing assistance, is help people compete for those funds. That's what helped Run Amok Maple take over the old Scrabble factory in Fairfield. So we think there are going to be more opportunities.
Okay, even if it were for a time limited period when there's a potential of more federal dollars out there. Okay.
Yep.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
in case it's helpful, last year, the policy choice of the legislature was to increase the READY program from 75,000 to 100,000, for which we were very grateful. And it's now in part of our base funding. So it's considered to be included in our base PTT appropriation in the big bill.
Oh, great. Okay, great. That's what I was asking.
Yeah. And so if we're given the ability to use up to 5 million of the 20 million for rural economic activities and conservation, we would use some of that to expand the READY program further.
Okay. All right.
Do you have any
Bobby.
idea what you generated in the past year with the grant writers in the READY program?
I don't know for the past year. I think cumulatively the first 225,000, we're now up to about $5 billion in grants received. And there's over $2 million in pending requests that people are waiting to see how they come out.
Mhm.
So
That's pretty good return then.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for coming in. I guess you didn't have to rush off, Jen, to your other more important committee assignment.
You frightened me. I didn't dare leave. Senator Starr's counterpart in the House, and they want to talk about this 25% of the 20 million for viability and READY. So with the committee's permission, I'll go now.
All right, well,
Yeah,
you're
thanks.
certainly welcome to go to your next item on your dance card, so to speak. Thank you. Thank you for coming in, and this has been very helpful to understand the funding request.
okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Gus.
Bye-bye.
So it's now not quite 2 o'clock, but I see that we have President Garamella and Wendy Koenig here from this University of Vermont. And so we will get started as it relates to the governor's recommended budget for 2022. And I don't know if you have a document and you need screen sharing or not, but if you do, I guess Chrissy will help with that. So welcome, and I'm going to let you take the presentation at however you want to give it. Needless to say, we are very interested in the high points. We don't need to know about the dollar to the Morgan Horse Farm.
Senator Kitchell, I want to let you know that I sent 2 documents to Chrissy, and we won't be screen sharing them, but you all have them for reference.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So President Garamella, welcome.
Thank you, Senator Kitchell. Do you want me to get started then?
Yes. Oh, please
Okay,
do.
Wonderful. Hey, well, congratulations to all of you on your new terms, and good to see all of you. I think I've seen you before, each one of you. It's great. Thank you for your service. I'm also very pleased that you gave us the opportunity to speak with you here. So I think certainly I'm more than happy to answer any questions the committee members may have, but I thought I'd give you a quick update on UVM, if you will, just the state of affairs. I know Senator Baruth has been on other committees and stuff where he's heard this, and some of you may be aware too, but it's probably worth a quick refresher. So you should have in your packages a fact sheet, sort of a one-pager. I think one-pagers work well. So there's a good number of stats in there that I think could be helpful, but I want to point out a couple of the key ones that I'm most passionate about. One, of course, is that 45% of Vermont students coming to UVM attend tuition free. And so this 45% number, almost half of the state students that come to us don't pay any tuition, and that's very important to me. This affordability and accessibility piece is a huge deal. And actually, most of the others, I think 91% of the students coming from the state receive some financial aid. And so it's a good bet for our students from the state. We're also a great source of brain gain for the state at a difficult time for the state with demographics. About 70% of those Vermonters who attend UVM stay in the state to work after graduation, and 32% of out-of-staters stay in the state. So this is really, yes, we have out-of-state students, but if we can get a fair number of them to stay in the state, I think there's almost no other source of a highly talented workforce for the state than UVM is, because they come and stay. Of course, you're all aware that we have an enormous economic impact on the state, 1.3 billion or so, according to a study some time back. And as far as the state appropriation to UVM goes, half of it goes for financial aid to Vermonters. A quarter of it goes to medical students from Vermont, and 25% goes to extension services that provides these services across the state. So again, 3/4 of the money goes to support students from the state, and 25% goes to extension services. So I just reiterate that one of the core sort of tenets of our strategic plan is student success, student experience, et cetera, which to me also means affordability and accessibility. And we've announced for a 3rd year in a row, something UVM had never done before, that we have frozen tuition for a 3rd year for next year. We will not be increasing it. We have frozen room and board. I tried to get people to see when we last had not raised room and board, and no one could find that record. So I believe it may be the first time we're keeping room and board from going up. Plus, we're cutting the comprehensive fees by a small amount. So from the time I came, it was very important to me that UVM not be among the most expensive public institutions in the country. We know the reasons for that. The reason, certainly a very important reason, is the very small appropriation, the lowest in the nation that we get from the state. But still, I wanted to do our best to make sure that the tuition didn't keep going up. And with the reduction in comprehensive fees, we're actually bending the curve, not by a lot, but by some. We're not just flattening it, but bending it. And this is something very important to me, and we will remain committed to it to the extent we can. So that there are some numbers in the handout that you're welcome to look at, and I'm happy to answer questions. I also wanted to give you, Senator Kitchell, and to your committee members, a quick update on the Office of Engagement. As you know, I've been speaking with you from the time we first met about UVM's third pillar of interest, which is in our land grant mission. This being the state that birthed Justin Morrill, and this is where the Land Grant Act started. The land grant mission is very important to me, and so our Office of Engagement that we've now set up, thanks to the funds that you provided from CRF funds to get it going, has been set up. It's very robust. In the short time it's been functioning, 5 months or so, we've made a lot of progress, and we're tracking very specific metrics that we're reporting. We've got a newsletter going out to all legislators, et cetera. And you should have one pager, if you will, on our Office of Engagement. And I hope you all on the committee have access to it. It says at the top, the 2020 impact report for the Office of Engagement. And again, I'll simply draw for now, just give you a quick sense of what it means, and then I'm happy to answer questions. The central work of the Office of Engagement, which is led by Chris Kaliba, professor in CDAE, our Community Development and Applied Economics, there are three central themes of what the Office of Engagement is trying to do. One is in the talent and workforce pipeline. I already gave you an important number there that, a good number of our out-of-state students are staying, et cetera. But how to grow that pipeline? Can we bring in folks from outside the state or alumni, et cetera, to come settle here? That whole thing is one piece. A second piece is business assistance. This includes our applied research, for which we're setting up a hub, our commercialization efforts that, of course, sort of give Vermont that vibe that we're trying to develop, where we want more people from across the region to come and move to Vermont to commercialize inventions and discoveries. And then the third piece is more broadly in economic development. I could talk about this for a long time. I led such an office in my previous institution, and I'm deeply committed. The main aspect of what we're trying to do is that this is having an impact and will continue to have an impact in every one of the 14 counties in the state. This is very important to me. We have examples. We're laying out a map, actually. I believe Chris Kaliba recently, a few days ago, presented to the House Commerce group, if I remember correctly, and is available to talk in more detail about the office. We're also doing open houses for legislators, and we'll get you information on that, and Wendy may speak to that later as well. So the fact sheet basically shows that the office is assisting businesses and others as we emerge from COVID, and I think this is critical. The state is struggling, and of course the CARES funds and the other funds from the federal government help, but we can do a lot as well. And so we've stood up the office in record time. We've acquired, Salesforce and such other sort of customer relations management type platforms to make sure that any inquiry to the office is responded to with very little delay. And the one ask we've come to the legislature with, and certainly to your committee with, is a $1 million ongoing appropriation to keep the office functioning. This is for operating funds for the Office of Engagement. There'll be other other funds that get added to the base over time as we go after program funding from federal sources, from corporate partnerships, et cetera. But just to keep the staff paid and the software licenses acquired and such, we need the $1 million base. I think we've already proven, and I'm committed to continuing to prove the value of this very small investment and the enormous return on investment. So, and again, I can come back to this if there are questions. Let me also briefly share, I guess with great pride, that our COVID performance, how we've handled COVID at UVM, is perhaps a national example. It's among the best in the country. Last fall, we tested, as we're doing this semester, we tested every student every week, which is far more than what the governor's requirement was. And we had 150,000 tests that we did, out of which less than 100 came out positive. So the fall was great. Certainly we did what we could, but our students took their Green and Gold Pledge very seriously. They did all the right things. They wanted to stay in Burlington and behaved, in an exemplary manner. And this semester is more challenging, but we believe that with all the efforts we've put in place, we should be able to see this semester through as well. And again, I thank you sincerely for the CRF funds that helped defray part of the costs, part of the enormous costs that went into our COVID response. And finally, I'll say that despite COVID being such a big part of all of our thinking right now, we have stayed focused on the future. UVM has been around for 230 years. It will be around for another 230. I won't be around for that long, but I want to make sure I make my contribution to the university to keep it strong. So we have we've laid out a vision. We've called it Amplifying Our Impact. We're going through an academic reorganization process, which includes a good number of faculty, lots of conversation across the campus to see how best to position ourselves for the future, but identifying extremely low enrollment majors and things so that we're using our resources as effectively and efficiently as possible. We're also sort of doubling down on our research and trying to bring more funds to the state. We grew by 25% in our research funds to 182 million last year. I'm hoping that continues, and this is a big boost to economic development. I also wanted to point out that my commitment to affordability means that the one priority for fundraising that I have given to everybody at UVM is that we raise money for financial aid. So we have the only thing I'm emphasizing when we talk to anyone who wants to give to UVM is to give to scholarships and financial aid. Partly our good performance with COVID, partly the regard with which parents and students hold UVM. We've been able, with the latest numbers, to also reverse the pay reductions that we had to put in place out of an abundance of caution. We announced a couple of weeks ago that all non-represented staff were the only people at UVM who went through any reduction in salary. We've unwound that. They're getting all that money back, and we've rolled back that pay reduction. So I'm very pleased about that. Our staff are certainly very happy, and we'll continue to be good stewards of the high quality of education for our students. For jobs, yes, jobs. We've had a very careful focus on permanent jobs not being lost during this very challenging time during COVID, and I think we're doing very well. So you should be proud of UVM, and I assure you that the investment, however small it is from the state in UVM, is put to very good use. So I hope that's helpful, Senator Kitchell, and I'll turn it over for any questions.
Okay, I see a UVM alum has got his hand up, Senator Sears, and you're muted.
Oh my God, I see. They should have taught me muting and unmuting.
It didn't exist.
They did not have computers then.
No.
Anyway, not to date myself too badly, but the figure that 70% of Vermont students, that I would assume that means Vermont resident students, graduated from UVM in 4 years at a higher rate than Vermonters achieve at any other state publics or out-of-state private schools. Is that, am I reading that right? That you have 70% of those who started graduate in 4 years?
Yes.
And you don't lose?
I think you were in the 30%, Senator Sears.
Well, I graduated, but I'm trying to figure out what happened to the other 30%. That I graduated in more than 4 years. I
Right.
liked it so much, I kept coming back for a few more courses to get to that magic number.
We're still offering
But
courses.
so I'm trying to understand what this means. So,
Yeah.
because
Senator,
it's a great number, which indicates a real success of Vermont students. But is it all of those who started as a freshman or women, whatever we call them now, moved up in 4 years and graduated?
Senator Sears, it's a great question. You couldn't have asked a more important question. I think too often this number is not looked at. So you're interpreting it exactly correctly. It's an extremely high priority for us that, this is another affordability element, right? If students are spending 4 years here and graduating, they're paying for 4 years of fees or not. In the case of 50% of Vermonters, 45. But if they came here, stayed for 5, 6 years and continued to pay, that's that accumulating debt and so on. So it is important that we not only recruit the students, a diverse set of students from underserved and minority populations and so on, but also see them through. So their persistence, their retention from first year to second year, all the services we provide them so that they do graduate in a timely manner. These are all very important to us. And so indeed, UVM, and I don't have the exact number at the tip of my finger, but we're in the top 5% or so among publics in the nation for 4-year graduation rates. What happens to the rest? They take a little longer. So but 70% do graduate in the specified 4 years, which means they become productive citizens sooner and aren't accumulating debt, et cetera. It is a very important number.
But as compared to the state colleges, it's significant. And I know that several years ago when we were looking at the state colleges, those numbers were very different, almost reverse of what yours are. That's why I'm trying to determine whether it's, those who started, also 91% first year students returned for their sophomore year. That also, I did return for my sophomore year. It was later on that I decided to test some of the world.
Well, we all take different paths. I think probably because Senator Bruce was not teaching at that point.
If Eddie had been.
One of the challenges we have, and that is we tend to think very much along, compartmentalized lines. And we have committees of jurisdiction. So education, higher education falls within maybe that policy area. But I think we're getting a broader recognition of the role that state colleges and the University of Vermont play in the Vermont economy. It's not higher education in the typical, in the historical sense, but the way in which they can address workforce needs, the way in which they contribute to the economic. So some of what we're looking at is beyond higher, typical or traditional view or definition of what is higher education. And that has to do with the technical and intellectual resources that are available in our public higher education institutions. But it's always a challenge, and we're always reminded how poorly we do in spite of everything in terms of our funding level. But your retention rates that's an area of examination. It was an area of concern. The state colleges system they have a different student profile, and they have a very different experience with retention. But I think that they've been trying to focus on that as well for the reasons we're talking about for debt. I don't know. We just had our election. We just had our nomination. So you're going to be getting some new trustees on the board. Senator Sears has not introduced his usual suggestion that we should get rid of them.
It's coming soon.
Oh,
Actually, I found a new co-sponsor of the bill. Actually, she will be the lead sponsor. I think she has more influence than I over the rest of the body. I'm hopeful we'll be successful in getting rid of those UVM trustees from the legislature.
I doubt if that'll happen soon.
Well, you know, today's performance really, I've got pictures of some members of the legislature who weren't exactly paying attention.
No.
well, it's like a classroom. I'm sure the student attention
But
deficit
anyway, yeah,
varies.
the bill will be coming. We hope that all the members of the Senate Appropriations Committee will support us. And, you know, Senator Hardy and I are charging ahead.
Good. Well, we'll anxiously await that. Senator Baruth, you have a comment. Obviously, this is tying very much into your professional life as well as your political life here.
Yeah, I was just going to say about Senator Sears' point. I think part of the reason people weren't paying attention is many of them had already sent in their ballots before they heard the nominating speech. But I just wanted to ask President Garamella a clarification. So when Adam Gresham came in for the administration, I can't remember which agency, but he talked about $1 million going to an agency that would make its way to the Office of Engagement. Is that the same line that you're talking about?
Thank you, Senator Baruth, for the question. And for the record, Senator Kitchell, I've learned long ago not to comment on my bosses. So whatever you choose to do with the trustees, I'm studiedly neutral on these matters. So for the record, okay.
Economic development, I think, is what we were told, Senator Baruth, but.
Yeah, so Senator Baruth, the answer to your question is that the ACCD is, we're working very, very closely with many entities across the state, not-for-profit, corporate, and government, and Secretary Curley and others. This will take a village. It'll take all of us to work together, and so they have a technology-based economic development program, TBED, I think they call it, where they're seeking some help from UVM on, and so. By all means, we've been collaborating closely with the ACCD. That is for a very specific program. It's for a platform to be set up for a specific program. It is unrelated to the ask of the 1 million for operating funds. I'm hoping that at steady state, that the state is supporting with a modest 1 million. It's the operation of the organization of the office, and that we fund programs as appropriate with federal funds, with corporate funds, with ACCD partnerships, etc. So this is one example. The TBED would be one example of something we would use UVM's technical resources to assist ACCD in that effort. But the operating budget that I referred to is a standalone.
That's a helpful clarification.
Okay,
it's a different 1 million then.
Mm-hmm.
Than what's on the. I think if I understood the Senator Bruce's
Right,
question,
so,
the 1 million on the governor's one-time list is not.
Mhm.
It's a different 1 million than you're requesting separately.
Yes.
That's correct.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify in my own mind, because as you know, different budgets can converge on one, in this case, this new Office of Engagement. I'm happy to see it stand up so quickly. I'm wondering, so now this is an ongoing 1 million to the base into the future, and that would be flat theoretically going forward.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I think one thing
Thank
which is, sorry. So one thing
that was
which is
it.
kind of puzzled me.
Well, sorry, here. You have more to your question, Senator Baruth, or before the
No,
president
that was it, but I
starts?
believe, go ahead, President Garamella.
Sorry, yeah, there was a little break in your sound, so I didn't know if you had stopped or not. Sorry. The appropriation to UVM is not pegged to inflation or anything like that, and so obviously our current appropriation has been in place for 12 years without any change, which obviously means it's over that 12-year period, it's like 22% less than we got in 2008. So to your point about the $1 million for Office of Engagement being flat, obviously our expenses will go up, but I'm hoping, and so it is then asked for a baseline 1 million being added. I'm hoping that as we prove our worth and our return on investment, that we'll continue to be able to attract corporate partnership attention and maybe even nonprofits and others who find the services of the office very helpful and are able to defray some additional costs as they grow. But yes, the ask is for $1 million on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Other questions or clarifications? Wendy, do you have any additions, or I just want to make sure you're earning your money?
Oh, thanks. I was gonna say to Senator Bruce's question, so, and President Garamella made the distinction well, that money for TBED through ACCD, some of it would be subgranted to UVM through the Office of Engagement, but some of it will stay and work within ACCD. So just to clarify that point.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, that's helpful. Other questions about what is happening, or general updates? You've given us an update on how well we're doing with COVID. I have one question. Last year, there was a bill that came and we really rewrote it in appropriations, and it had to do with financial assistance for primary care physicians and nurses. And we were very reluctant to set up a program that only had 1 year funding. And so we had asked to really look at how we were funding or where we had funds for educational assistance, whether it be through the appropriations to higher ed or to, in fact, the Vermont training program and so forth, and look at how we could take money that was in the system but not being matched, and had a similar goal of supporting workforce training, credentialing, and meeting workforce needs. I wondered if you could give us an update. Have we made any progress in identifying sources so that once matched actually would put more money into supporting those health occupations that were the subject of the legislation? And I don't know who had the honor of serving on that committee. Was that you, President Garamella, or was that Wendy or someone else?
I did not serve on it.
It was actually the Dean of the College of Medicine, Dr. Rick Page.
Okay, so do you have any update that you can give us on that?
So Wendy, why don't you, if you have an update, please go ahead, but I also want to address the point more broadly.
I don't, Senator Kitchell, but I will check in with Dr. Page and get back to you with an update.
All right, thank you. It was something that we passed right at the end.
I remember, yeah.
And part of our dilemma, of course, is the report on the rural workforce, the healthcare workforce. And there seems to be all kinds of ways we compete with an inadequate supply to begin with, and very little attention on how we actually increase the supply to better align with the need. And for nursing, Senator Westman always has the figures from that report, but the number of nurses is in the several thousands, the need over the next 20 years. And so to me, it's not just a matter of competing with an inadequate supply. The underlying challenge is how do we look at our capacity, our program resources, and how can we expand them so that we are generating the volume of medical professionals that the system needs.
Mhm.
So that's why I'm oftentimes we are very good at trying to ameliorate the symptoms, but we never get into dealing with what is the fundamental problem here, or pressure point, and how we address that. So I appreciate an update on that. President Garamella, you had a comment? You
Yeah, I
said,
just wanted to add more broadly. So you mentioned nursing as well. You know that we doubled our nursing, the number of students we accommodate in nursing. And soon after I came, I asked, well, could we double it again? The problem seems to be practica, that these nurses need clinical practice, and there aren't enough places that can host them. And yet I've not given up on that. I've been pushing the dean. We've got a new dean. Noma Anderson is our Dean of Nursing and Health Sciences. I hope you get to meet her. She's an amazing woman, and most recently she was Vice President for Diversity and Equity and Inclusion in Tennessee. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to work with her to grow those numbers a little bit, and the kind of support you're talking about can certainly help. Even if we can go from 140 or so we have now to 150. I mean, that's 10 more nurses, and I think that's very important. Similarly, I certainly in theory, I agree very much with the importance of the primary care physicians and such. But more broadly, I think that something we can do better and are in the process of improving is our non-traditional learning options. I think that with COVID having shown everyone how it is possible to take classes virtually and the physical proximity isn't always limiting, I'm challenging our folks to understand how they can have sort of non-credit, non-traditional courses for adult learners and things like this, modules of information that somebody could take 2 hours of a class or 6 hours of a class, get a micro-credential or a badge or something, and it'll help them a lot in their functioning in their role, or improve their job opportunity, et cetera. So you should expect to see our continuing distance education operation, but really all our colleges contributing more to that space in terms of non-traditional and sometimes non-credit options. So in general, it goes in the direction of what you're speaking, Senator Kitchell, but Wendy and I will check with Rick Page and get back to you on the specific report you're asking about.
all right. Other questions, or here's your opportunity. Yes, Senator Starr, you're muted.
You love saying that.
I think I'm worse than Sears about that. No, this morning I had a very interesting conversation, maybe for a good 30 minutes, with Leslie, a new person that's in charge of CALS and those.
In charge of cows?
No, CALS, CALS. The students that take ag up there.
College of Agriculture and Life Sciences.
Yeah.
Oh,
And,
I thought you said
was,
cows. Oh, sorry.
well, there's cows in the mix there. But it went very well. She's very energetic and seems to have a good handle on things, from talking about 4-H or the students, the 2+2 program. It was good. Also, Anson Tebbetts, the Secretary of Ag, was on. So, we had a good conversation about how well it and how good it is that we all work together to build a stronger ag economy and rural development. And so I just wanted to pass that on to you folks, and thanks a lot for being with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Starr. I'm very, very proud of Leslie Parisi. She came from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, one of the top ranked universities. She had actually grown the profile of her department while she was there to become the 5th best department in the country in terms of NIH funding and so on. So she's really brought great energy to CALS, College of Ag and Life Sciences. And we're actually in the process of a search for the extension director as well, and getting close, I hope. And so certainly the partnership with Secretary Tebbets and some of the others has been great. But Leslie's taken to all this like a fish to water. She's loving it. I had a conversation with her earlier this morning, and she just says, "Hey, so much energy on campus." So I mean, she's just really positive, which is great. And we have other, again, I hope some of you get to meet Noah Anderson, our Dean of Nursing and Health Sciences, who brings just great experience to campus. She also brings diversity into our leadership rank. She's African American, but that's clearly not the reason she was hired. She's got such great experience, and especially with the interest in nursing and such, I hope you get to meet her. Our Vice President for Research is new. The person in charge of enrollment management is new. So we've got some very good leadership that we need as we think about new ways of thinking about how UVM functions and keeping ourselves viable and stable into the future.
So I must confess, I haven't really got a clear picture of what falls into life sciences. I'm probably more familiar with the traditional liberal arts side of things. So could you give me an example? Obviously in ag, I assume, soil science and those programs, but are you talking about nutrition management? Nutrient management for ag? Are you talking about nutrition as it relates to food diets, or is that in health? I would assume that would be in health. So what else falls into life sciences?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact,
I don't know. I'm going to ask Senator Baruth. What does fall in there?
I believe the question went to President Caramel.
Senator Kitchell, it's interesting you ask, because that's one of the things we're looking at in our reorganization. We have, I think, biology offered out of 6 different places. We have environmental studies and environmental sciences in 7 different places. We just went through with the deans a sort of streamlining of the environmental science and environmental studies courses to make sure that students aren't confused in the same way. But to your point specifically, there's things like agroecology and such, of course, as you would expect. But animal science has a certain life scienceness to it. There's biochemistry, there's biological sciences. There is dietetics, nutrition, so that's all part of CALS. There's a good amount of environmental systems that's in this space, but food systems. UVM is very well known for food systems. In fact, with Senator Leahy's help, we were able to get an agricultural research station that started here just about a year and a half ago, and it's going really well. Microbiology, molecular genetics, and plant biology, like you said. So all those are part of life sciences. But we've embarked, as I said, in a discussion across campus, a friendly discussion to look at, are we sort of parsed the right way? Are our colleges named and structured the right way? Or should we sort of think of different ways to do that? And hopefully by the time we're done with that, you won't ask questions, or you won't need to ask questions like this.
I don't know. Maybe. But it's just a terminology changes, and it's I just thought I would ask so that I would have a better sense of what went into that particular academic bucket. Senator Starr, you're going back to school, are you?
Well, no, but just yesterday we had a bunch of a group of feed dealers from across New England on a Zoom call about animal feed. And I mean, you talk about science, you ought to hear them, how they put animal feeds together using nutrition and the testing of green grasses as well as corn, and then adding certain minerals to balance every feed ration. I mean, Yeah, you used to call up the grain man and have a load of grain of 16% brought to the farm. Hell, now it's a regular science of the guy comes and does all this testing, and I'm sure most of them went to UVM or Cornell and got degrees in animal nutrition and
Or they might have gone to
Okay.
Colorado. Colorado State's got some very good ag
yeah,
programs.
it's
But
really
that's a land grant
amazing.
school too.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I'm glad to know, Senator Starr, you were paying attention to that testimony, and
Well,
too
I
bad you
don't
can't go home and
usually,
apply it.
I don't usually sleep, just at night.
No one questions that, Bobby. You're thinking all the time, even when you're sleeping, I think.
Probably.
Other questions? I'm just looking at the committee, Alice, or Senator Sears asked his question, Senator Westman. I think then thank you for coming today and the materials that you provided. And
Senator Kitchell?
Yes. Oh, it's Senator
it's-
Ballard. You're on the phone. Yes. You have a
Yes,
question.
exactly. So, yeah, I did. Thanks so much, President, for being with us. And I know we're not really the policy committee looking at this. I wonder if you could just speak a little bit more about the cuts that were made to the departments, giving us a little bit of background about how you arrived at the decisions for which departments should be cut.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Ballard, and happy to engage in a more detailed discussion with you as well. So I think bottom line, as I've written in multiple op-eds and things like this as well, and our provost and our Dean Falls, who's making some very difficult decisions, has described, the UVM, like almost all of higher ed, is facing an uncertain future, demographic challenges, New England in particular. And so we have to be careful to size our expenses to match the revenue. We have, over the last 10 years, as far as I can tell, had about a $10 to $12 million difference between our revenue and our expenses. That we get more expense than revenue. And so we cannot just do everything that we want, even if it's very expensive. So all colleges across UVM, it's not just one college, all colleges, in fact, they had a deadline to come up with proposals earlier this week. So everyone's gone through this exercise of looking at majors and minors that have extremely low enrollment, as in they graduate 2 or 3 or essentially less than 5 students a year. And the challenge is that those majors and minors, if they were continued, we had to continue to offer them as they move up into their junior year and senior year and stuff. They're very, very small numbers of students. And we cannot afford to do that, as some of our classes are attracting 150, 200 students, et cetera. And so out of fairness and equity for our faculty to have the same kinds of teaching loads and such, we've asked all colleges to look at this. As it turns out, it was a very small number of students, like 120 or so out of 4,650 that are in those majors. And I think there's been some confusion, Senator Ballard, between majors and courses. I know that courses in some of these areas are very popular, and they will continue. There is no plan to retire those classes because they're popular and they provide a liberal core of education for all students. It is just the majors which very few students are choosing to go into that we have said we must discontinue, so that we can put the resources towards high quality offerings. And we've also said that any students that are currently in those majors or minors will be able to see them through. It's not like they'll suddenly be left without a major or a minor. And I actually believe that contrary to some of the conversation that is out there, this will help us strengthen our liberal arts. We have approved recently something like 40 credits of general education requirements that will be required of all of our students. And the College of Arts and Sciences, I hope and I believe, will be stepping up to offer those. Think of 40 credits being almost a third of the credits that students take while they're here. They'll need to go to the College of Arts and Sciences for that. So, and despite all this, we will still have 44 remaining majors and 52 remaining minors in the College of Arts and Sciences, which I believe is a lot more than many of our peers are able to do, especially even the rich ones. So this kind of thing is happening throughout the country, and it is a response to what students are voting with their feet, as I've written, and we need to be responsive to those students. And I think creative solutions are coming out. These departments that are being discussed are thinking about creative ways to continue to provide their offerings, et cetera. And the Dean Falls is very pleased with the collaborations that are happening in most of these instances. So I guess that's a quick summary, if that helps. And I'll also say that this discussion has been going on for 5 years. I understand in 2018, there was a 12-month study by a faculty committee that looked at this and came up with very similar recommendations. There was just no action taken then. And so as our state appropriation remains flat and the costs keep going up, we must make some small adjustments to keep us robust into the future, to not fall into the same traps and same challenges that we're seeing across higher ed in the nation.
I very much appreciate you taking the time to explain that. Part of the reason for asking the question, just so I can be very transparent here, is that we get a lot more people who are tuning in to our committee hearings. And some of those folks they're not reading VT Digger, they're not following along, in terms of information that you might be putting out from your office. So this is a direct way for you in many ways to speak to Vermonters about the thought that went into it. And so I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll certainly know that I can follow up with questions with you directly. So thank you very much.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain that, Senator Ballant. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's good to expand, because you had said that academic reorganization was really looking at your low enrollment and number of majors. So that expands. And I guess that's a point we all need to remember, is that people talk about our meeting remotely, but the fact is we have more people listening and participating in that way in our committee work than we ever would if we were at the State House. So this is an opportunity to provide some additional context for some of the information. So thank you for that question. Otherwise, I think at this point, I'm going to let us move to the Vermont State College system, and we have our witnesses are in the waiting room. So thank you very much, President Garamella, and thank you very much, Wendy.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you.
Kitchell, to come talk to your committee. Any questions, please follow up, and we'll be happy.
Don't worry, we're not shy.
Okay.
That's true. Thank you.
So thank you. I see Sophie Zatney, and I see the Chancellor's here, and Sharon Scott, your Chief Financial Officer, and Catherine Levasseur is. Am I missing someone on my screen that isn't that I haven't referenced yet?
No, you just have the three of us today.
Okay, well, the triumvirate, welcome. So we're taking up the Vermont State College budget request, and appreciate your being here today. We know what the governor's proposed. We know what the select committee, and Senator Baruth is a member of that select committee, so he's very familiar with the recommendation. And so with that, why don't you start? Do you have a document that you want to share, or I'll leave it up to you to take your presentation from here?
Thank you
I see
very
Catherine's
much.
nodding her head.
Yes.
Okay.
Catherine's managing the slide presentation. So thank you, Catherine. So thank you very much for welcoming us back into the committee again. I'm Sophie Zatney. I'm the Chancellor for the Vermont State College System. With me today is Sharon Scott, who's our Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer for the system, as well as Catherine Levasseur, who's our Director of External and Governmental Affairs. So again, we want to thank you for the opportunity to provide you with an update on the VSC and also our FY22 budget request. And we also want to thank you for the significant investment that the Senate has made in the Vermont State Colleges in the Budget Adjustment Act as well. So as you all know, we have 4 member institutions, Castleton University, the Community College of Vermont, Northern Vermont University, and Vermont Technical College. Across all 4 institutions, we educate over 10,000 Vermonters each year. We employ over 3,000 Vermonters. And in the spring of 2020, we graduated over 1,800 Vermonters into the workforce with certificates and degrees. In the fall, we stood up a CRF workforce initiative that enabled 971 Vermonters whose employment was affected by the pandemic to take nearly 1,400 courses to upskill and reskill at a time of tremendous need. And as you're well aware, we're undergoing significant transformation this year with guidance from the governor, the legislature, our board, and the State Select Committee on the Future of Public Higher Education in Vermont. So we are working to re-envision the Vermont State Colleges for the future. And as we do so, we're converting many of the challenges that we've confronted, both pandemic-related and financial, into opportunities for transforming the system to better deliver for Vermont and for the students we serve for decades to come. So as we've been thinking about change, we've been focusing on 3 key questions. Does it meet the needs of students? Does it meet the needs of the state? And does it contribute to the Vermont State College's financial sustainability? So student success is the key focus, and we're committed to delivering on the higher education and continuing education needs of Vermont and Vermonters while preserving the high-touch, personalized approach and close-knit campus communities that the colleges are known for. And while doing that, we're seeking to better serve students where they are. And that means with a learning modality that works for them, on a schedule that works for them, with the courses, programs, credentials that work for them, and that provide them with the skills they need to attain their life goals, and above all, at a price they can afford. We're also looking at providing education for life. We're creating opportunities for Vermonters at every point in their adult life, from early college dual enrollment programs for high school students to credentials of value for working adults and those seeking to upskill and reskill. We do recognize that moving forward, we need to develop even more high quality educational opportunities that meet the needs of students, employers, and the state by expanding the availability of credentials of value, such as associate's degrees and credentials and certificates that will enable students to secure higher paying employment or advance at work. We also need to take steps to boost enrollment of non-traditional students by providing the education and trainings that they need. In addition, we continue our work on creating stackable credentials within degree programs to provide the maximum value and flexibility for students. We also view Vermont as our community. So in addition to serving our students and meeting the workforce needs of Vermont, we are looking to maintain our physical presence in each of our current host communities, combining a reduced physical footprint with expanded access to academic programs statewide. Rural public institutions such as ours provide crucial educational and employment opportunities to local residents. We serve as economic, social, and cultural anchors in our host communities, and we help to educate workers in high demand local industries such as healthcare, education, business, mental health counseling, and hospitality and tourism. To achieve fiscal sustainability, we do recognize that we need to reduce administrative costs, and a common accreditation for 3 of our 4 institutions, as is being proposed by the Select Committee, will facilitate the consolidation of administrative functions system-wide. And this should enable the Vermont State College system to avoid duplication, to increase efficiency, to improve compliance, and to reduce costs. So right now, the Vermont State Colleges are currently exploring the Select Committee's key recommendations. And these are a single accreditation and single leadership team for Northern Vermont University, Vermont Technical College, and Castleton University, while maintaining the Community College of Vermont as a separate institution, as well as providing further administrative consolidations. So briefly, this is just a timeline of where things currently stand. So we've been engaged in ongoing visioning and project planning. We have a big board meeting coming up on Monday, the 22nd. We have provided an opportunity for extensive public comment from January 8th through to yesterday. We received over 188 public comments through our website. We've received numerous other letters as well that have gone directly to the Board of Trustees. And the board held a listening session last night for approximately 2 hours, and I think we had about 30 members of the public, internal and external stakeholders speak at that meeting. And then, as you're aware, the Select Committee issued their second report on the 12th of February, and we will be making a presentation to our board, as I said, on this coming Monday, February 22nd. And I know that NCHEMS has been in and spoken with you. They will also be coming in to speak to our board on Monday.
I don't think we've had them.
Oh,
Yes,
you haven't?
we
I
did.
think it's because I've seen Senator Baruth introduce them so many times. I thought they were.
Oh, wait. Oh, yes, we did.
Yeah.
It's earlier
Okay.
on. I'm sorry. I'm drawing a blank. I apologize. We did have them. And so the second committee report was just last week then.
Right, that came out a week, yes, is that last, in Zoom time, it's hard to remember, but I think it was last Friday. It was released, yes.
Okay. All right. I know, I apologize. I do remember, and Senator Baruth was very helpful, and they made themselves available upon very quick notice. So I'm retrieving that information from my archives. Thank you.
Right, so we're not going to go too much into what their proposals are based on that, but we did want you to know that even before the establishment of the Select Committee, the Vermont State College system was working on internal transformation. And this includes both transformation of our system operations, such as the creation of a system-wide budget, as well as academic changes that benefit students, such as a common general education core system-wide that's available both in person and virtually. So one thing we're certain of is that transformation will take time and money, which is why we do have a big ask of you today. The Select Committee's report has recommended maintaining a physical presence in all of our current locations, but there will be significant costs associated with transforming our institutions into the Vermont State College system of the future.
On February 1st, the Finance and Facilities Committee of the Vermont State Colleges received its first passed budget. This budget, which is still very early in our process, estimates a deficit for FY22 between $32 million and $45 million. Approximately $25 million of the deficit is structural, as has been discussed with you previously, and the remainder is due to COVID-19. The operating deficit due to COVID is a combination of both increased expenses and lost revenue. Our expenses are straightforward: technology to support remote learning and working, COVID testing, public health and safety employees, personal protective equipment, HVAC system upgrades, and the like. But less obvious is the loss of revenue associated with our camps and conferences that had to be canceled due to COVID, foregone revenue due to closed residence halls, and reduced student enrollment due to a lack of confidence by students and often their families at sending them into school. These factors, especially the unknowns regarding lost revenue, are likely to be with us for several years to come, both in terms of reduced headcount due to smaller than normal incoming classes in fall of 2020, as well as factors about which we do not yet know. Many questions will inform the future, such as how soft will enrollment be for traditional learners post-pandemic? Will students living and studying remotely in high school now be more comfortable learning remotely in the future? How much residential room capacity will be necessary? Is the Vermont State Colleges system prepared to meet the needs of the changing learner? And put quite simply, will we be ready for the VSC of the future? The structural deficit shown on this slide is $25 million currently. Put simply, the structural deficit is the amount of standard operating expenses in excess of our normal revenue. And 4 key factors drive our structural deficit: declining demographics and enrollment over time in our area, market conditions that have forced us to compete on price and discounting, an expense structure that is more than 62% salaries and benefits, and state support that has declined on a per FTE basis since the 1980s. The combination of these factors, which were largely hidden in plain sight due to increasing enrollments through 2008, have placed the VSC on the back foot. The Select Committee on the Future of Public Higher Education in Vermont's first report stated that the VSC could see as much as $5 million in operational efficiencies each year over the next 5 years, with transformation. Based on the committee's recommendation, the operating efficiencies and improved revenues would come from aggressive administrative consolidations to drive down operational costs, a single accreditation, deploying cutting-edge technology to democratize program delivery by allowing classes online, remote synchronous, and in hybrid formats, offering self-paced and reduced duration courses, placing an emphasis on credentials of value and relevance to workers and adult learners. The Vermont State Colleges requests $81 million in general fund before the use of other funding sources. The historical appropriation is the amount of funding the VSC received in its base appropriation for FY21. The amount, $30.5 million, excludes funding for allied health and global commitment, and these additional funds are approximately $1.5 million. The approved capacity and affordability category, listed as $17.5 million, is the Select Committee's recommendation for increased base funding. According to the committee's reports, these funds are necessary to provide adequate capacity for the Vermont State Colleges to evolve over time and addresses barriers to success for Vermont residents. And as noted on this chart, these funds would be an ongoing request. The structural deficit is the current balance of structural deficit available after annual operating efficiencies as described in the Select Committee's report. The balance declines over 5 years from $25 million in FY22 to zero by FY 2027. Funding the structural deficit while the VSC transforms allows the system to meaningfully transform over time and prevents undue harm to Vermont and Vermonters. General fund transformation expenses, estimated at $20 million over 4 years, includes the funding necessary to support the transformation of the Vermont State Colleges to the system of the future. The estimate was developed based on my personal experience overseeing the financial and operational aspects of creating Northern Vermont University and takes into consideration the complexity and scope of the Select Committee's proposal. Key costs included in this estimate are information technology infrastructure, project and change management, organizational restructuring, website development, marketing and branding of a new institution, legal compliance, accreditation, and more. And these costs are separate from the physical costs to transform campuses, which are in our capital budget request. The total investment in the VSC is $51 million. This is an increase of $8.5 million from the Select Committee's recommendation of $42.5 to accommodate transformation expenses. In total, the VSC needs $81 million to successfully respond to its structural deficit, respond to COVID, and transform. And we recognize that the general fund dollars are very scarce. The chart on the right, therefore, shows our current base appropriation plus one-time sources we anticipate having available to support FY22. So looking at the chart, we begin with our need, which is $81 million. We deduct the $30.5 million in the general fund base from a historical funding. Next, we take $5 million from HERF funding. Each of our colleges have been allocated money directly from the federal government. That money is approximately $12.5 to $13 million. However, about 25% of that money has to go directly to direct student aid, much like the federal stimulus that we receive as adults here. We right now are not accounting for all of that remaining fund, which is a little more than $9 million, because the money is directed specifically to each of our individual institutions, and we're still learning how we can use those funds. So conservatively, we've identified $5 million for that category. Next, we deduct $3.6 million in the budget adjustment. Now, we recognize that that's different than what you have, and we're being conservative because we know the BAA is not quite finalized, and we just want to be a little careful as a regard to that. And last, the Vermont State Colleges have been taking very significant actions on their campuses to drive down their costs, and this work is already underway. So assuming HERF, the budget adjustment, and austerity measures are all realistic estimates, the VSC would require $67.4 million in general fund for FY22. This slide is a crosswalk of our FY21 base budget to the current request and the governor's recommended budget. Again, assuming that we have HERF, the budget adjustment, and VSC austerity measures, that they're all realistic, our requested general fund request is 67.4. The governor's recommend was $50 million, so the variance between the two is 17.4.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on, if you could go back to the last slide. So you have 81 million minus the historical, the 30.5.
Yes.
Right. Uh-huh.
Okay. Then at the bottom, we have 67.4. I'm not, for some reason, I find that confusing because that in my mind, that's 67.4.
It's a combination of the 36.9 needed plus the 30.5 in the base.
That's
to
correct.
Get to the total.
I understand, but it says less the base. I don't.
It is confusing.
I apologize for the confusion in the slide. We can certainly correct that.
Okay.
Senator Kitchell is correct. The 36.9 plus the 30.5 is what we're looking at overall.
So the
governor's proposed has got the 30.5, which is in the historic base, plus out of the 36.9, $20 million out of the, so about half of what that additional investment requires.
That's correct. So if you go to the next slide, Catherine.
I just want to,
yes.
Before you go to the next slide, you're asking for $36.9 million more in general fund appropriation than the governor put in his budget.
No, the governor put 20 of the 36.9. So the difference is
16.9.
Yes. That's
There's too many figures here and calling it an investment is kind of, it's an appropriation and it competes with other appropriations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yes, that's important because what is being requested here is it appears as though it's on top of whatever is already there, and that's not true. So it's the base is there, the 30.5, and then out of the additional 36.9, the governor's proposed budget is at 20 million, which leaves the 16.9. And that's and when you add it all up, that's a hard thing to do because it makes it look like such a huge number unless you peel it apart like the onion.
Yeah, that's what I was responding to. This slide is very difficult to work out the numbers because they're added and then they're taken away and then added again without any overt reference to adding it.
It must be our liberal arts education standing in the way.
I guess so.
The crosswalk slide might be a little bit easier in terms of a representation.
It's not 17.4 though, it's 16.9. I thought we were going to need 17.4 in there.
It's the governor's recommend, if we follow the bottom section of this slide, the governor's recommend is $50 million. There's a slight variance between the governor's recommend and the actual historical state appropriation for the Vermont State Colleges. That's the $500,464 that's there. So we add that back in. We have several other items. The combination of the first 4 lines equals our $81 million, less $13.6 million. So the difference between 50 million, which is the top green line, and the $67,400,000 is 17.4. So it's $17.4 million greater than the governor's recommend.
Yeah, that's what I came up with.
Yeah, well, because you didn't have the 500,464 there.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is probably a little bit clearer slide, slightly clearer. I apologize.
No, I apologize. But again, using the term investment, we were trying to mirror what's in the select committee's report, and that's the term that they use. So yeah, again, sorry if that is confusing.
Well,
Can I? Oh,
Okay, so
Uh,
Senator Sears and then Senator Baruth.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm concerned about sustainability. I recognize the importance to the economy of the various districts where these colleges are and where our state colleges lie. I recognize the importance of the state colleges, but you talked a lot about sustainability, and given the competition for the limited number of students, I'm concerned that we're investing in something that I'll use your term, investing in something that may not be able to survive. I think the community colleges are completely separate, and maybe even the technical colleges. But I'm looking in my area, where kids in Bennington County, where are kids going to school when they choose another educational opportunity? Just saw one of the local football players signed a letter with Assumption College down in Worcester, Mass. He could just as easily have gone to Castleton. Wonder why he didn't. I think times are changing in education, and I don't see this. I don't know. I mean,
It's a
I
lot
know
of
the
money.
majority, where the majority of the committee will go. I obviously am not, but I really am concerned about this idea that this is going to be a sustainable path for the future to fund 3 campuses.
Right. So, I mean, I would,
Why don't you respond to Senator Sears, and then we're going to go on to Senator Baruth, and then Senator Westman had a question. So if you respond to the first question, and then we'll move on.
right. I mean, I would say probably the reason, and I obviously don't know the football player that's going to Assumption, but affordability is a huge issue. Our colleges really struggle to compete with colleges outside of the state, and largely that's because of the historic underfunding we've had. We're just not affordable. We are very expensive. So the select committee recommendation is a multi-year recommendation, and it does include 17.5 million annually as an increase to base in order to make us more affordable into the future. We do know cost is a huge factor that deters students from coming to the Vermont State Colleges. We do believe that just from the experience of the McClure graduation gift at Community College of Vermont and our experience with the CRF Workforce Initiative, that if we can reduce the cost or take cost away as a barrier, we will be able to attract more students. What the Select Committee has recommended is not, they're not saying we're going to grow our way out of this. I think we all are realistic about the demographics. But they do point out that we have communities that we're not well serving right now, particularly adult non-traditional learners, that we can do a better job of serving. The other piece is we do serve as economic anchors in the communities that we're in. So if you were to look at us as a purely market-based, way of approaching things, I think you would get to different answers. But I do think we are important in the rural communities where we're located, and we provide we're sort of economic engines in those communities. We're also access institutions. So I think the social equity issue is important as well, that we provide access to higher education, to better jobs, etc. If we weren't in these communities, I think there are swaths of students that simply would not go on to get any kind of higher education. And I believe that would be detrimental to the long-term future of Vermont. So yes, it is a lot of money. It's partly a reflection of the historic underfunding. So it's really a catch-up situation. But I think there's going to be significant costs to the state if we don't do it, both in terms of the future, but also the actual costs of closing institutions will be significant. And that is addressed in the Select Committee report. It was also touched on by Jim Page in the report he did last summer about how vitally important these small rural public institutions are in their communities, not just economic, but also socially and culturally. So I hear you, but I think we are key to the future of Vermont.
Well, I hope you're right. So I'm sure my concern is that I've seen at least three private colleges close in southern Vermont recently, including Southern Vermont College in Bennington. And I don't, they were all up against a similar problem. They weren't public colleges, they were private colleges, but nevertheless, they failed. And I think this is what concerns me about putting another 16.9 million into this. So I'm just being, I'm one member of this committee, and I have reservations.
I think everybody needs to go into this with their eyes open in terms of what an ambitious agenda it is, and the amount of money that is requested, and exactly how and the other thing, if you look, there's nothing that in the governor's proposed that deals with the base, which is part of the structural problem, and how that gets addressed over that 5 years.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the response.
Yeah. So that's, to me, that's a very significant question that we have before us, and it's what is there for one time and what is required for an ongoing funding commitment. So I think your questioning and need for us to really vet this is quite important. So appreciate that comment, because it's not going to be an easy path. I think the next committee member was Senator Baruth, followed by Senator Westman, and then we'll go to Senator Ballot.
Yeah, I take Dick's point, and it's a point that we're going to hear, for as long as this initiative is running, this transformation initiative. And I think it's absolutely a fair question. I guess the way I would look at it is, if you go back to ex-Chancellor Spaulding's proposal to close 3 campuses, in other words, shutter half the system, that would be sustainable compared to the situation we're at now, because it would be half the size, half the mission, providing opportunities for half the students. It wouldn't be in keeping with what we've traditionally laid out as the plan for the state. So the first thing the select committee did was to discuss at great length the needs of the state. And we decided as a group, and that doesn't mean it speaks for the Senate or the House, but we decided that it was a need of the state to have an institution of higher education in the Northeast Kingdom. And I believe in that. I believe we would be failing the state of Vermont if we said we're going to cut off an entire region of our state, and those people can fend for themselves or drive to get the credits that they need. I don't think they would. I think the chancellor is right about that. And we would, in effect, just leave them in the lurch. So what the select committees tried to do is say, we're going to keep those institutions up and running, but we want physical transformation. The footprint has to shrink. The administration has to shrink. And then add to that, we're going to have a much more robust online sharing of course opportunities and major opportunities, so that people in the Northeast Kingdom can get majors and courses that are available only in Castleton now. People in Castleton would get enough experience now with Zoom to know that that's possible in a way that we didn't imagine 5 years ago. So part of the transformation cost is shrinking the physical footprint, but another part is growing this robust online delivery system that will not only be marketing to traditional students, but non-traditional students, older students who in Vermont have an uptake rate of very, very little compared to other states. The last thing I would say is that the sticker shock that we get from looking at the ultimate increase in the base funding here is because that's what other states do now. They provide in the $50–55 million range on average in the New England region. We lag them by 25 million as it stands. So just to get up to the neighborhood standard is what we're trying to do in 5 years here. That doesn't mean we're going to be going crazy. It means we're going to be doing what New Hampshire already does, and other states already do. So, my own feeling is that we have, in a sense, we've failed the system by underfunding it historically. What this is seeking to do now is get the sustainability in very, very clear ways. That doesn't moot Senator Sears's point. It's a question that I hope he'll ask every year, and we should, as a committee, ask every year: is the sustainability transformation successful? But it does have that end goal in mind.
Well, having your perspective from the work of the select committee is helpful on this. I think this whole discussion, and then I'll move on to Senator Westman and Senator Ballant, brings home that there has been an insatiable desire to expand services and benefits provided by state government. And to some, in many ways, that has been at the cost. And I think we've talked about it, Senator Sears, it relates to what we do for services for our seniors in our residential care facilities, what we're doing, our mental health system is brought right to the edge. And if we look at legislation, there's still an unrelenting desire to add more, and they're wonderful benefits and services. Everybody would agree, but it comes, I think, at the expense of what have been some of the core areas of state government. And I think that as a committee, it's really hard to weigh out, all these competing priorities, because base funding is very, very difficult. And that's why, the one-time money makes it easy for the short term, but it doesn't deal with a long-term structural deficit. And Senator Sears knows that, and Senator Westman, as well as any of us. So I think this is an example, and for people listening, we can add more things, but that competes with just a fixed revenue base. And to some extent, that has been funded in a way by underfunding some significant areas of the budget. And our state colleges are one, and a couple of other systems that I've talked about are right up there at the top. So it's hard to get that message out, because generally the view is what more could we do, or this would be nice, or whatever. And it's hard. It's important we get back to those fundamental questions. What should be those core obligations of state government? So Senator Westman, and then Senator Ballant.
So this is the sheets that were provided. I have a whole lot of questions about. What I really need to understand is the question that Senator Kitchell raised. What is base, and what is the bottom line base number that we need, and what is one time on this sheet? I basically look at the structural deficit number, and I look at the transformation expenses, and think of those as one time or time limited. And so I can't tell what the bottom line increase in base funding going forward would have to be. Is that the 17.4 or is it 20?
It's actually 17.5. It's the improved capacity and affordability ongoing line that was on the second to last slide. And again, the terminology is the terminology of the select committee report. We tried to make it as align it as clearly as possible.
You have 35 million, 30,500,000.
They want 5 million for the base, I think, is increase each year.
Is it possible that Sharon could put the document back up so we
Yes,
can
we
all
can
look
do
together? Or
I
Catherine?
think
whoever
Catherine
was-
is doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, And I start with a base number normally. What do we have?
Maybe we
to
should
add?
go to the other one. Did the other one have it
Previous
over the
one.
multi-year?
Catherine, go to the last one with the multi-year, please.
Right there. Okay. That's the one I think is helpful because I think that perhaps
So
answered the
Senator
question.
Westman, in a perfect world, and we recognize that we live in an imperfect world,
Yep.
we would maintain the 30.5 historical base and then
Right.
add 17.5 million on the improved capacity and affordability line. And that would be added to the base. Now we recognize that that's not something that you likely could do all in one fell swoop, but in a perfect world, that's what we would hope. So go from 30.5 to 37, 38, sorry, 48 million, essentially.
Well, and okay, I get this, so basically, you show for the next 5 years that you get no increase in base.
We would show no increase in base, recognizing that over those 5 years, we would hope that you would find a way to increase the base from 30.5 to the 48 million by the time we get to 2027. So
Okay.
recognizing that we wouldn't be asking for anything beyond what the select committee has requested related to that. The other two lines are related to structural deficit and transformation expenses, and those would decline over time. While it's listed as a straight line decline for structural deficit reduction, it is possible that it could accelerate if we are able to achieve some savings more rapidly than others. So that could be possible. But right now it's shown as a straight $5 million per year addressing structural deficit. And then the transformation expenses, we estimate the total cost for that is $20 million over the course of the 5-year cycle, front loaded to the first 2 years because we need to accelerate the work in order to be able to achieve the savings that will be reaped in the successive years.
So I basically get that it's time limited and it can be one-time money. I understand that. The 17.5, thank you, that's very helpful in that. I will just say in this, I hear Senator Sears' concern. I hear what Senator Bruce has laid out. I think and this is just personally, I think the competition is places like Southern New Hampshire University, and the online presence of the state college system is not there. And for adult students, that's particularly distressing. And I know lots of people that are taking online classes at places like Southern New Hampshire now.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen studies that show that obviously the Southern New Hampshire University has been extraordinarily successful with their model, but also that there is interest from people like going to, even if they're doing courses online, they like to have a close connection in their state and then to have a physical sort of campus they can go to. So when we're talking about these alternative delivery modules, modalities, we're also talking about students being able to come on, maybe doing a mixture of courses. And again, being able to, the courses being ubiquitous. So coming onto the campus at Johnson, for example, and participating in a course being taught by a business professor down at Castleton. So, I mean, we're really trying to think creatively about how to deliver what it is students are looking for.
And I would say, I think that's absolutely the area you have to look at if the state college system is going to be successful. I think there are people that want some level of on-campus experience, but particularly people that are working now need flexibility.
Now, Senator Ballant, you've been very patient.
Well, thank you, Senator. I was sitting here thinking about my experience being a teacher in 3 different rural schools in Vermont and thinking about the students that I had. I mostly taught junior high, but also at night I taught community college. And it was interesting to sit here thinking about what enables a student to see themselves going on to do any additional education? And you can almost tell in middle school who those kids are, who feel like they can make that step, not just the intellectual or financial step, but the cultural step to imagine themselves on a college campus. And I had students who never left their towns in Vermont. I mean, we would take an 8th grade trip, we'd raise the money together and try to get the 8th grade to go to Montreal. Most of them had never been out of their corner of Vermont. They certainly hadn't been out of the country. And so there is something really important that the Vermont State Colleges offer to these students in these towns who don't imagine that they will be able to take advantage of this kind of higher education. So that's one thing that I'm thinking about. And I'm also thinking about how in my conversations in the last few months with folks on Economic Development Committee that I serve on in the morning, and with lots of people talking about the Vermont State College system, is that we know we've got to do a better job, as Richie just said, reaching incumbent workers, older students, and figuring out how do we transform the system to reach them at the time and the place that makes sense for them in terms of their work. And I know, Sophie, from our conversations, it's something you're all thinking about in terms of what the transformation will look like. But Senator Baruth really spoke very beautifully and really speaks my mind about we have a responsibility to these towns and these corners of Vermont to have a touchstone in education. So I'm hoping, yes, it is a lot of money. There is no getting around that. But I do think it's a wise investment on so many levels when I think about all the students that I've had over my career. So thank you.
I would just add, we do have our students are complicated, that we do serve students that face a lot of challenges. We did include some of those stories, I think, in the packet we previously submitted in connection with our prior Budget Adjustment Act request. So, we really are serving those students that otherwise would not get served. And hopefully they're going to move on to, have productive, fulfilled, higher paying jobs, whatever, as a result of their access to programs and building stackable programs. So again, if somebody can't see themselves in college just yet, but maybe they get a credential and then they can build on that in a few years' time to really move forward with their careers.
Well, 17 million is a heavy lift. There's no question about it. But we've got to start thinking about, because all I'm saying is a lot of stuff we do on economic development that I see, some of those are new. The question is, do we make those, or do we make economic development investments in our workforce and in our higher education in those education centers? And Senator Sears is right. There's been such disproportionate impact. And well, of course, Castleton wasn't proposed for closing, but down in the Rutland-Bennington area, if you look at the economic impact that's happened with the closure there, it's been of schools as well as industries. There, the community college presence is probably the one that is the most highly utilized portion of the state college system in the southern end of the state. I would think that would be the case. So,
community college is widely used.
What?
Community college is widely used down here, at least in Bennington County.
Yeah.
A lot of people attend there.
And one of the things that we have, which may not necessarily and doesn't begin to address it, but you made reference to the fact that you had that money last year, the CRF money that served almost 1,000 Vermonters with coursework or credentialing. And our education committee is going to be sending us a recommendation that we but that we would do another round of that kind of training for our workforce, because obviously the pandemic has had quite an impact on putting people out of work and how they could upgrade their skills while they're out of the labor market. And the other consideration was, which is going to come our way. We haven't made a decision, but this is to give the committee a kind of advance warning, is that there was money, I think about 600,000 from McClure, that assured every Vermont senior of the ability to take a course at CCB, and thinking that that would be a good investment to make with some one-time money that would connect Vermont students and give them an experience with educational programs, and hopefully give them success and an interest in pursuing coursework beyond that. So Senator Nitka, and then Senator Starr, you were first, and then Senator Nitka.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your presentation. I think it was very good and up to date. And you talk about, our chair talked about economic development, and I see both Linden or Northern Vermont universities, both in Linden and in Johnson, as economic drivers in our communities. And with the 17.4 that we need, I don't see any reason, if we have plenty of one-time money to get by this year, I don't see why we couldn't use some of that to plug that hole this year, hoping that the economy and student numbers, things will change, more children, more young people want to go to college. I mean, look at it in a positive way, that next year our numbers could be better. And
You still got a lot of competition for the base funding, though. That's our problem. I think we'll be obviously having a lot of conversation around the funding and the recommendations that are coming from the select committee. And I think it's really spurred an important conversation that is much more expansive than looking at higher ed as just one area of the budget, and the extent to which our budget and what is spent here has collateral impacts in so many different places throughout the state, and for Vermonters. So Senator Sears had to leave at 3:30, and unless there are further questions, I'm going to suggest that we wrap it up today, Thursday. We try to schedule an end date at 3:30 so we can make some calls and do some emails and do some follow-up on our sections of the budget. So any other comments that you want to make? Oh, Alice, I'm sorry. Yes.
I wanted to make a comment about the community colleges and how successful they are. And I'm assuming that they've taken a lot of the students away who would have gone to the state colleges. And, it's a great program in that they can transfer all their credits all over the place. But I mean, is somehow doing something a little bit similar to that, something that could help? Look, are not many of those students who would have been in the state college system? I mean, there are others, of course, but.
I mean, we obviously have students that transfer from the community college into our other institutions. We are all part of the same system. Again, we try to view things as being student focused and student centered. So if it's in the best interest of students to go to the Community College of Vermont for 2 years, and it's more affordable, they can, live at home, get credits they need, and then transfer onto a 4-year institution. My personal feeling is that that's better for the student. They're going to graduate with less debt. They might finish their degree, and otherwise, if they couldn't afford it, step out, have an incomplete degree in student debt. Also, the Community College of Vermont can help prepare them academically to meet some of the standards at the residential colleges. Often they're more used to dealing with students who aren't perhaps as well prepared, and so they're in a better position to really have those students be college ready. So I don't view it as a negative. I mean, we're trying to build more pathways for students from within the community college into our other programs. And I know we have examples of that: nursing, early childhood programs, where we're really trying to build that programming. But again, if it works for students to do it that way, I think that's a good thing. We really need to meet the student they need.
I certainly don't view it as a negative. I mean, I think it's been great for students, but I'm wondering, could you offer some courses via some of those campuses to kind of have a role there? The buildings are there.
Oh, you mean you use the faculty at the other state college?
Buildings at
programs?
least.
Yeah, CCV is co-located with our other colleges in a number of places. So down in Brattleboro, they're co-located. Up in St. Albans, they're co-located with VTC. Right now in Bennington, Castleton and Vermont Tech both have nursing programs down there. We're looking at whether they could co-locate, but CCV is right across the street. I know, I mean, there are a number of those kinds of partnerships. We're always looking for ways to do that. So if there's synergy there that can work, then, and I think that's one of the benefits as we think about a transform Vermont State College system too. If we can have a common accreditation for 3 of the institutions and CCV, I think we'll be able to build on a lot of those efficiencies and opportunities as well, rather than thinking only, about your specific institution and not thinking more broadly from a system perspective.
Thanks.
Okay. Unless there are further questions, I know this is going to be a topic of a lot more discussion. So thank you for coming, and we're going to adjourn the committee for today.